Emily, this house, it was always meant to be mine. Sign the divorce papers and leave. Nathan's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth that once drew me to him. I stood in the living room, the walls echoing his harsh words, feeling a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Our marriage, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a battlefield. You can't be serious, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is our home, Nathan, not just yours. He smirked, a gesture so unlike the man I had fallen in love with. Our home? Emily, wake up. You're just a housewife. I've been the one paying for everything. I clenched my fists, feeling a storm brewing inside me. A housewife? Is that all I am to you now? I retorted. Nathan walked closer, his presence overbearing. Exactly. You've done nothing but live off my hard work. It's time you realize your place. I could feel my parents' worried glances from the corner of the room. They had come over for dinner, unaware they'd be witnessing the collapse of my marriage. I didn't want them to see me like this, broken, belittled by the man I once adored. Fine, Nathan, I said, my voice laced with a newfound resolve. I'll sign your papers. But remember this, you will regret it. He laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Regret? Emily, you'll be the one with regrets. I turned away, my parents following silently. As I walked out of that room, out of the life I had built with Nathan, I knew this was not the end. It was a beginning of my fight, my retribution. As I sat in my small but cozy apartment, the memories of my past flooded back, painting a stark contrast to the present. I was the cherished only child of my parents, born after years of their struggling with infertility. Their joy knew no bounds when I came into their lives, a sentiment echoed in every childhood photo, every birthday celebration. Emily, you were always the center of our world, my mother used to say with a gentle smile. My parents, though not wealthy, spared no effort in providing for me. They encouraged my education, my love for reading, and nurtured my dreams. But with their sacrifice came an unspoken burden, the pressure to find happiness, to make their efforts worthwhile. Meeting Nathan seemed like fulfilling that unspoken promise. He was charming, attentive, and shared a similar background. An only child with aging parents. Our connection was instant, our conversations filled with laughter and shared aspirations. Our wedding was a joyous affair, celebrated with tears and blessings from both families. But the fairy tale started to crumble soon after. Nathan's true colors began to surface once the honeymoon phase faded. His sweet words turned into sharp commands, his once admiring glances now carried a hint of disdain. You need to be more efficient around the house, Emily. Look at how my mother managed everything despite her job, Nathan would often say, comparing me unfavorably to his mother. His relentless criticism wasn't just confined to household chores. He started controlling our finances, giving me a meager allowance, scoffing whenever I suggested I could return to work. Work? What for? You can barely manage the house, he'd sneer, his words cutting deeper each time. As I sat there, reminiscing, anger boiled within me. How had I not seen the signs? How had I allowed myself to become this person, a shadow of my former self, living in a loveless, controlling marriage? The realization was bitter, but it sparked a determination within me. I will not let this be my story, I whispered to myself, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was time for Nathan to see the real Emily, the woman who wasn't just a beloved child or a submissive wife. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The days turned into months, and the love that once seemed endless within the walls of our home slowly twisted into a suffocating trap. Each morning began with Nathan's cold demands echoing in the kitchen. Remember, Emily, dinner needs to be perfect. My colleagues are coming over tonight, Nathan would command, his tone leaving no room for protest. On one such evening, as I meticulously set the table for Nathan's guests, my hands trembled with suppressed anger. The sound of laughter and casual conversation filled the living room, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Emily, this steak is slightly overcooked, Nathan commented loudly, in front of his colleagues, a smirk playing on his lips. His words, seemingly trivial, were a deliberate jab at my efforts. I forced a smile, replying, I'll make sure it's better next time. But inside, I was screaming. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone who enjoyed belittling his wife, showcasing his dominance in this skewed power play we called our marriage. The evenings when Nathan's parents visited were even more challenging. They treated our home as their own, never acknowledging my efforts to make them comfortable. Nathan, on the other hand, would spare no expense to please them, often at the cost of our own needs. "Why can't we invite my parents sometimes?" I once dared to ask. Nathan's response was swift and harsh. "Why should I spend my money on your parents? They're not my responsibility." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the depth of Nathan's selfishness and disregard for me and my family. He had created a world where only his desires mattered, where I was nothing more than a silent participant in his scripted play of domestic bliss. But no more. The fire of rebellion was kindling within me. I was tired of being a mere puppet, tired of the disrespect and emotional torment. It was time for Nathan to see that I wasn't just his obedient wife. I was a woman with a voice, a woman who deserved respect. "I will not be broken," I whispered into the darkness, my resolve strengthening. The seeds of my plan were already taking root. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. The day my parents' house was caught in a devastating fire marked the beginning of my rebellion. The house, a symbol of my childhood memories, now stood partially destroyed. My parents, though safe, were shaken and disoriented. This was more than just a building, it was a repository of cherished memories and love. I remember standing amidst the charred remains, my mother's words echoing in my ears. "This house held so much of our life, Emily. Letting it go feels like losing a part of ourselves." That night, I lay awake, pondering over my parents' plight and my own stifled existence under Nathan's rule. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan not just to secure my parents' future, but also to free myself from Nathan's tyranny. The next day, I approached Nathan, my voice steady but laced with faux naivety. "Nathan, my parents' house? It's beyond repair. I was thinking of buying them a new one, using my savings." His reaction was predictably self-centered. "Your savings? Well, as long as it's not my money." But there was more to my plan than he knew. The house I was considering for my parents was under renovation, set to be a perfect ruse for my greater scheme. Weeks passed, and the day arrived to help my parents move. Nathan, believing the house to be a simple purchase, had no idea of the trap I was setting. His arrogance was my advantage. As I orchestrated the move, Nathan arrived unexpectedly, declaring ownership of the house and demanding a divorce. It was the moment I had been waiting for. "Fine, Nathan, you shall have your divorce," I said calmly, hiding the triumphant smile that threatened to break through. Little did he know, the house he so arrogantly claimed was not the real deal. The actual property, a modest but comfortable home, was waiting, its location a secret kept from Nathan. As I left with my parents, the look of confusion and defeat on Nathan's face was the first victory in my silent war against him. But it was just the beginning. The real retribution was yet to come. In the days following the move, I worked meticulously, my actions cloaked in secrecy. Nathan, oblivious to my intentions, basked in his perceived victory. It was time to unveil the truth and shatter his delusions. I recall the day vividly. Nathan had called, his voice dripping with condescension. "So, Emily, how does it feel to be back at your parents' old cramped house?" I smiled into the phone, a cold, calculated smile. "Actually, Nathan, we're quite comfortable. You see, the house you claimed was just a temporary arrangement. The real property is elsewhere, safe from your greed." There was a pause, a silence filled with his dawning realization. "What are you saying, Emily? That can't be." "Oh, but it is. And about the divorce papers you so kindly left for me, I've already filed them," I continued, my voice steady and strong. Nathan's reaction was a mix of confusion and anger, a stark contrast to his usual arrogant demeanor. "This isn't over, Emily. You can't just—" But I cut him off, no longer willing to endure his tirades. "It is over, Nathan, and let me remind you, I'm not just the meek housewife you thought you married. I am a lawyer, well-versed in the law. Your attempts to intimidate me are futile." His silence on the other end was the sweetest revenge, a validation of my newfound empowerment. The years of belittlement and control were coming to an end, and I was the orchestrator of his downfall. As I hung up the phone, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had turned the tables on Nathan, using his arrogance against him. It was a victory, not just for me, but for every moment I had felt insignificant in his shadow. The path ahead was clear. I would rebuild my life, free from Nathan's oppression, and stand tall, a woman reborn from the ashes of a marriage that had sought to diminish her. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. My phone buzzed, and Nathan's name flashed on the screen. Bracing myself, I answered, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and resolve. "Emily, this is madness. You can't do this to me." Nathan's voice was frantic, a stark contrast to his usual composed and condescending tone. "Oh, but I can, and I have, Nathan," I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. "You thought you could walk over me, take what's mine, and discard me like I was nothing. You were wrong." He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the cogs turning in his mind as he tried to comprehend the gravity of his situation. "Emily, listen, we can work this out. Let's forget about the divorce and start over," he pleaded, his voice laced with false sweetness. The suggestion was laughable. "Start over? After everything you've done? No, Nathan, I deserve better, and so do my parents." I could feel his desperation through the phone. "But the house, my reputation, my career, you're ruining everything." "That's the consequence of your actions, Nathan. You chose this path when you underestimated me, when you treated me and my family with such disregard," I said firmly. The call ended with Nathan's pleas fading into a defeated silence. It was a victory, not just legally but morally and emotionally. I had stood up to the bully who had made my life miserable, and I had won. In the following weeks, Nathan's life unraveled. His attempts to control and manipulate had backfired, leaving him to face the harsh reality of his actions. His once flourishing career took a hit as the details of our divorce and his behavior became the talk of the town. As for me, I found solace in my parents' company, in the small yet comfortable home that was truly ours. I had reclaimed my life, emerging stronger and more determined. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, free from the shadows of a loveless marriage. Sitting in the sunlit living room of the modest house that was now a sanctuary for my parents and me, I reflected on the tumultuous journey I had endured. The walls, freshly painted, seemed to symbolize a new beginning, a stark contrast to the oppressive walls of the house I once shared with Nathan. It had been several weeks since the divorce was finalized, and with each passing day, the weight of my past life lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and self-assuredness. Nathan's attempts to reach out had ceased, his once looming presence now just a distant memory. My parents, who had witnessed my transformation, were my pillars of strength. "We always knew you had this strength in you, Emily," my father said one evening, his eyes brimming with pride. I had returned to work, immersing myself in the world of law, a world where I was respected and valued for my intellect and skills. The stark contrast to my life with Nathan was both liberating and empowering, but it wasn't just about reclaiming my professional identity. It was about rediscovering who I was beyond the roles of daughter, wife, or victim. I was Emily, a woman of resilience and determination. One day as I sat in a cafe, lost in thought, a familiar face approached me. It was John, an old friend and colleague. "Emily, it's been a while. You look different, happier." His words made me realize how far I had come. "I am happier, John. I've come to understand that sometimes letting go is the first step to finding yourself." Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and as he left, he said, "Let's not wait another lifetime to catch up again, Emily." As I walked back home, I felt a glimmer of something new, a possibility of a future that was mine to shape. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for new beginnings, for new love. But this time on my terms. The journey had been long and arduous, but as I stood in my parents' garden watching the sunset, I realized that every challenge had led me to this moment of tranquility and self-discovery. The shadows of my past had finally lifted, giving way to the warm, hopeful light of a new dawn.
Please make sure the loan repayment is handled. While I was busy at work, an unexpected email suddenly appeared. I immediately contacted Bruce, who started explaining calmly. "Oh, sorry about that," he said. "I've fallen for someone else and have decided to start a new life with her." He also disclosed his intention to take the luxury car that was recently purchased under my name with a loan. Despite my attempts to talk him out of it, my husband ignored my pleas, abruptly ended our conversation, and became unreachable. Eventually, Bruce vanished with his new partner, leaving behind a considerable amount of debt for me. As the mother of our 9-year-old son, I was stunned by this unfair turn of events. At 38 years old, my name is Tiffany, and my husband Bruce, who is of the same age, left our family, which includes our bright son Russell. Russell has always shown exceptional intelligence, engaging with academic articles and discussing complex issues from a young age. On the other hand, Bruce was never stable, struggling to keep a steady job. Despite my steady full-time employment and our future plans, Bruce had only recently maintained a stable income for about 4 years. Bruce had often talked about making lasting memories together as a family, which led us to decide to purchase a $110,000 camper van. However, Bruce failed to meet the finance company's requirements for a loan, so I had to take it out in my name. On the day the camper van was delivered, I received a shocking email from Bruce stating he would take the van since the loan was in my name and that I would be responsible for the repayments. Confused, I called him immediately, only to hear him confess that he had fallen in love with another woman and decided to pursue a relationship with her. I thought it was just a fleeting thing, but it turned serious, so I'm planning to start a new life with her. He said and mentioned the divorce papers that we had argued about before. He stated his intention to file them and abruptly ended the call. This conversation was the first time I realized the depth of Bruce's betrayal, a truly shocking moment. All my subsequent attempts to contact him were fruitless, and I was left to face this harsh new reality alone. When I returned home from work and went to check the drawer where the divorce papers should have been, I found it empty. The papers were gone, and I was left grappling with the huge debt from a $110,000 car loan. Despite my countless attempts to contact my husband through emails and calls, he never responded. My son Russell, noticing that I was acting differently, approached me with concern after dinner. "Mom, what's wrong? You haven't been eating much lately." "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Yeah, maybe I'm just tired," I replied, trying to hide my distress. When people lie, they look up to the right. Lying is bad. Dad hasn't been home for 5 days. Did something happen between you two? Russell's acute observation startled me, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Feeling that I could no longer conceal the truth, I decided to share everything with him. "It's just something your dad would do," I admitted, unsure how to express my sadness. "Aren't you sad?" he asked. "No, I kind of understood from how things were going," Russell replied, his tone detached as if he had foreseen the events. Although he seemed unfazed by the prospect of our family separation, I knew deep down it had to affect him. Silently apologizing to Russell in my thoughts, I tried desperately to distract myself from the turmoil, yet my body betrayed my emotional strain, and my health began to decline. There was a training session at work that day, but I couldn't stand up. "Sorry, I can't stand right now." "I need to take a break," I managed to say before collapsing. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital room. The doctor informed me that I needed detailed examinations and admitted me for further observation. Lying there, staring at the IV drip and the hospital's white ceiling, tears began to flow freely. Just then, Russell burst into the room, his face etched with worry. Seeing him so distressed, I quickly wiped my tears. "Mom, what happened? Is it serious? You're not going to die, right?" His voice trembled with fear. "Of course not." "I wouldn't leave my dear son alone," I reassured him, my voice soft but firm. "That's good. I was so scared when the school teacher called to say you were taken to the hospital," Russell admitted, his relief palpable. Seeing his concern, I realized just how much Russell was affected by everything happening around us. and it strengthened my resolve to handle our challenges more openly with him. The shock was so intense that it felt like my heart might stop. Russell, despite being mature beyond his years, was still just a 9-year-old boy. His concern spurred a strong resolve in me to recover, but my health was deteriorating faster than I expected. After a thorough checkup, the doctors diagnosed me with a serious illness and recommended immediate surgery. Following their advice, I underwent the procedure. A month had passed since Bruce left. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, returning home, I opened the mailbox only to find a demand letter for the car loan payment. I had assumed these payments were being automatically deducted from my account. Panicking, I checked my account balance with my cash card. Shockingly, what was once $42,000 had dwindled to just $54. I thought to myself, Bruce did this. I want to ask him to return the money, but I can't reach him. What should I do? Without the camper van, selling it to recover the funds wasn't an option. As I sank deeper into despair over these misfortunes, Russell noticed my distress. He placed his hand on my forehead and asked, "You look pale. Are you feeling sick again? You don't seem to have a fever, though." "I'm physically fine, but your father took not only the car, but all the money we had saved. I can't work due to my condition, and now we have no money," I explained, feeling overwhelmed. Seeing my predicament, Russell's face lit up with determination. "I see. Then I'll deliver newspapers and search the internet to see if there's any work I can do," he declared. His spirit and resolve encouraged me. It's not the time to be down, I told myself, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Sorry for worrying you. I can't afford to be weak. I'll change my mindset and try to do whatever I can," I said, managing a smile for him. Russell smiled back and then suggested something unexpected. "Let's plan how to get the car back from Dad." "How can we do that? The camper van is in your name, right?" he asked. "Yes, but what about it?" "Then maybe we can." Russell began suggesting an idea I hadn't even considered, something completely out of the box. I was stunned. "Also, I have no idea where your father is," I admitted, the reality of our situation settling in. Despite the challenges, Russell's creative thinking and proactive attitude gave me hope that perhaps there was a way to navigate through this crisis. "So let's check my phone," I suggested, remembering how a month ago, when we went hiking as a family, Russell felt a bit disoriented. Surprisingly, the usually reliable Russell had felt lost during that hike. Based on that experience, we bought him a child cell phone and installed a GPS app on it, which both Bruce and I could access. With this app, I can see where Dad is in real time, and he's been moving around a lot. "Oh, is that so? But what if we find him and he just gives us a vague answer and escapes again?" I mused, trying to think ahead. "Don't worry," Russell smiled, revealing a hint of a plan. "I've already taken precautions." "What did you just say?" I was taken aback by his initiative. To my amazement, Russell had independently taken action while I was in the hospital, something truly astonishing. "I can't believe such a clever child is mine," I thought, impressed by his foresight and resourcefulness. He had even kept tabs on Bruce's whereabouts, including his movements with his mistress. "All right, let's teach Dad a lesson for betraying us," I agreed, bolstered by Russell's confidence. "Okay, let's start the plan right away," I responded, and together we prepared for what was to come. With Russell by my side, I felt unstoppable. Bring it on, anywhere, anytime, I thought to myself. 5 days later, my phone rang. "Ah, it's me. Please, I need your help." "Who might this be?" I played along, even though I knew the voice all too well. "Don't play dumb. It's your husband. I'm being questioned by the police because of you. At this rate, they might ask me to come to the police station voluntarily. Help me out." "Oh, is that so? Just wait a moment then," I replied, maintaining my composure. I immediately went with Russell to the location Bruce had mentioned. To my surprise, it was a forest park near our house, a popular camping spot. There Bruce was being questioned by the police in front of his car, looking utterly bewildered. I felt a mix of pity and resolve. I approached the police. "We need to talk about a couple. Could you please give us a moment?" I asked, and they stepped away. Inside the car, Bruce's mistress sat cross-legged, glaring at us, but her presence no longer mattered. "Sorry about that. Thanks for coming. But why did the police suddenly show up at my place?" "I don't get it," Bruce stammered, confused. "That's because I filed a report about the missing camper van," I explained calmly. "What? Why would you do that?" he asked, bewildered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" "My car was stolen," I stated matter-of-factly. Bruce, foolishly thinking that actions between spouses couldn't be criminal, began to utter nonsensical excuses. But the world isn't that naive. "You know you filed for divorce, remember? So we're practically strangers now. And driving a stranger's car without permission is a crime," I explained, as Russell had cleverly figured out. Russell, typical for his sharp mind even at a young age, had pieced everything together. "But I didn't steal the car, I just borrowed it for a bit," Bruce protested weakly. "Oh, is that so? Well, I'd like to use my car now, so could you return it?" "That would be helpful," I said, extending my hand for the keys. Bruce, though reluctant, handed them over after a moment. With the keys safely in my possession, Russell, who had been quiet up until now, began to question his father. "Hey, why did you abandon your family and choose to run off with her?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. Caught off guard by his son's blunt question, Bruce was visibly flustered and awkwardly scratched his head. This prompted Bruce's mistress to chuckle smugly and interject. "It's because I'm more attractive than your mother. Look at me, you can see it, right?" He fell head over heels for me and decided to leave his family. "Quiet. I didn't ask you, old lady." "Dad, you answer," Russell commanded with a stern tone. Julia was silenced by Russell's firm directive, but Bruce remained silent. "If you can't explain, that's fine. I'll just have the police come back and take you," I threatened, seeing his hesitation. "Wait, hold on." "Okay, I'll talk," Bruce finally conceded. Julia, it turns out, joined Bruce's company 2 months ago. They were attracted to each other and became involved at the welcome party for new employees. Later, it was discovered that Julia was pregnant, and Bruce decided to start a new life with her, leaving us behind. "Why did you take the camper van?" I pressed on. "I quit my job and thought about selling the car for money. But it seems like you were using it quite a bit, weren't you? I thought it was a waste to sell it right away, so we decided to go on a trip," Bruce explained. "Wait, how do you know all this?" he asked, puzzled. "Remember when Russell got lost? After that, as a precaution, we bought him a kid's cell phone and installed a GPS app. Did you forget? We installed it on your phone too, so I knew where you were all this time," I revealed. By the way, I later found out from Russell that he had pretended to get lost during our family hike. A clever move that helped us prepare for any future uncertainties. I was stunned by Russell's ability to think ahead and his strategic actions. I suspected something was off with Dad, so I came up with this plan to monitor his actions, he explained with a calm that belied his age. "You are a formidable child," I remarked, half joking, half serious. "I hope never to become an adult like Dad, who betrays important people without a second thought." Bruce, faced with the harsh reality Russell presented, looked pitiful and was unable to offer any defense. In contrast, seeing Russell, only 9 but speaking and thinking with such clarity and firmness, gave me a profound sense of strength and resolve as a mother. I felt I couldn't back down, especially when it came to settling things properly. Also, return the $42,000 you withdrew from my account right now. That was our joint property as a couple, I demanded. I don't have to return it, Bruce retorted stubbornly. No, it's not like that. The money was what I saved bit by bit since I was single. After all, you always quit your jobs midway, so we hardly ever saved money together, did we? I countered, my voice firm. Hearing that the $42,000 had been squandered by Bruce and his mistress was appalling, but it also made me feel relieved about the decision to divorce him. That's how it is. But if you've stolen and used the car and my money, that's going to be a serious crime, I continued. What? I just sent the police away, so it's not their business anymore, right? Bruce tried to dismiss the issue. I only said we would talk. I have no intention of withdrawing the complaint. I must add the theft of my money to the report. I asserted, Russell, should I call the police now? I can do it with just one button on my phone. Julia Bruce's mistress had been silently observing our conversation, but quickly tried to exit the camper van. At that moment, she let out a scream that echoed around us. The reason was startling. Outside the car door, Julia's parents stood, their faces red with anger, ready to explode in fury. Startled, she stepped back as her parents began to yell at her. I'm sorry. Don't be so angry. But why are you here, Mom and Dad? I called your parents beforehand. I revealed, watching the scene unfold. What? Why? Julia stammered, taking it all in. The truth was during my hospital stay, Russell had visited Bruce's office and tearfully told Julia's parents. My dad left the house with another woman. This preemptive move by Russell had brought everything to this pivotal moment, turning the tables on Bruce and Julia dramatically. In the wake of Russell's visible distress and frail demeanor, the staff at Bruce's office had grown suspicious of Julia, who had recently departed the company alongside Bruce. They had noticed the pair being overly friendly and even shared photos of them looking cozy at the welcome party for new employees. Learning from her colleagues that Julia still commuted from her parents' home, Russell managed to obtain her parents' address. With this information, Russell and I visited her parents, armed with a photo of Julia. When we met them, I explained everything that had transpired. Thus today, after contacting Julia's parents again, I asked them to stay nearby for a while, ready to confront their daughter. How could you do this to me? Julia exclaimed, her face a mix of shock and betrayal. I don't want to hear that from you. That's my line, I retorted. Then noticing her pronounced belly, I couldn't help but ask, by the way, your stomach seems quite big. When is the baby due? In 2 months, she replied, flustered. Wait a minute, that doesn't add up. You and my husband met only 2 months ago. What's going on? The timeline was off, and everyone sensed it. This was the first time Bruce heard of the due date, and he stared at Julia with wide eyes. Wait, what does that mean? Are you stupid? Don't you get it? It takes about 8 months from conception to birth, which means the child she's carrying isn't yours. You're so foolish, I pointed out, the realization dawning on him. Julia, now cornered, retorted, What do you mean? Have you been deceived? Oh, I almost got away with it. She confessed with a scoff, her demeanor shifting to resignation. Can't help it now that I'm caught. You're so naive. You can't see through lies at all. A fool. Don't mock me. My whole life is ruined because of you. What were you thinking? Bruce blurted out, his frustration boiling over. Bruce and Julia then started a heated argument, but no one intervened, allowing them to air out their grievances. Meanwhile, we contacted the police again to update them on the situation. As dusk turned to night, the area was illuminated by the red lights of police cars approaching the scene. No, really, I was wrong. I'm truly sorry. I'll work hard and never cheat again, so please just don't arrest me, Bruce pleaded, desperation in his voice. People don't change that easily, especially lazy people like you. Russell chimed in, wise beyond his years. Exactly, Russell's right. I can't trust you, I affirmed, standing firm in the chaotic unraveling of truths. Reflecting on the situation, I firmly told Bruce, think about your actions and prepare to face the consequences at the police station. If I get arrested, I won't be able to pay back the money. Is that okay with you? Bruce pleaded, looking for any leverage to avoid accountability. I don't mind. Pay me back after you've served your time for your crimes. Take your time, don't worry. I've already found you a job. I responded calmly, outlining a clear path forward for restitution. Let's see, there's Russell's child support, plus the $2,000 you owe me. I'm not sure how much it will all add up to, but you'll work and pay it all back, I declared. Turning to Julia, the mistress, I had one last thing to say. You might think you're just an observer here, but don't forget, you're an accomplice to Bruce's theft. Be prepared for the consequences. When I mentioned that Julia would have to pay if Bruce couldn't return the stolen money, she shivered with fear. Julia sought help from her parents, but they sternly refused, declaring, "We disown a daughter who causes trouble for others." Thus, Bruce and Julia were taken away in a police car thanks to the smart strategy devised by Russell. Although they were released from detention soon after, they faced a substantial financial obligation to me. Through a lawyer, I claimed $42,000 in damages. Additionally, I secured an agreement from Bruce to pay $1,000 a month in child support for Russell. I also introduced Bruce to a subcontracting factory associated with the company I work for. The support payments and other charges I claimed from Bruce would be deducted directly from his salary and deposited into my account. Furthermore, I sold the camper van, liberating myself from the associated auto loan. Since these changes, my health has improved remarkably. I am now more energetic and committed to my job than ever. Russell, too, has been actively helping with household chores and errands. We are both committed to moving forward strongly so that Russell can pursue whatever path he loves without any hindrances. I'm pregnant with your husband's child. I was speechless at my sister's sudden confession. So I want a divorce. I'm going to remarry your husband. I'm sorry I stole your husband, a doctor earning $10,000 a month. Next to my sister, my husband was looking down at me with a serious face, and my sister's hand was tightly holding his. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. What's with that face? As usual, you are ugly. That's why your husband has a change of heart. From now on, you are going to live on your meager salary. Hearing my sister's loud laugh, I felt my heart cooling down. I'm the one who wants to say sorry. They probably don't know. I'm laughing in my heart without telling them about my real sister's terrible misunderstanding. My name is Jessica. I've been married to Brandon for 3 years. I met my husband in a university tennis club. Tennis was my only stress relief in my suffocating university life, which was full of studying. Since the club itself was a cheerful activity, I often spotted him on the tennis court on campus, sacrificing my study time. You have a nice warm-up. The first one to talk to me was my husband. My husband, who was in a different faculty and didn't seem to be busy studying, always came to me first when I visited the club. I played tennis until high school. I quit playing seriously because of an injury, but you are good at it. It's completely different from me who is just playing. I can teach you. I think we're a great match. I believed such words, which seemed like a typical pickup line, from the bottom of my heart. In fact, I had never dated a man before and had hardly even had a proper conversation because I was always studying. I was completely taken in by my husband's positive attitude. I had no idea of the hard times awaiting me 5 years later. After graduating from the university, we got married. Although it would be a lie to say that we had no fights or breakups during our school years, I always forgave my husband's sloppy behavior, and our relationship dragged on until graduation. I'm sure I'll become a good husband. How much I believed in his proposal, I wonder. Now it seems doubtful, but at that time, I still had trust in my husband. There were feelings of a 5-year-old rotten relationship. He's not a bad person at heart, and I accepted his proposal with a rather light feeling. We both started working. I had a strong desire to work, and my husband didn't oppose me going out. Rather, I think he encouraged me to go for it. In fact, with the income of 2 people, we had quite a household income. Having this much economic freedom at a young age, I think we were blessed. We didn't have children. For our jobs, it was still early in our careers, so we focused on setting up our lives first. I was climbing up the career ladder smoothly and having fulfilling days. But oh, what's this? I inadvertently went to the smartphone that my husband had left in the living room. A message from an unknown name. Normally, I tried not to pry into his privacy, but my husband had a history of passive cheating. It was back in our student days, but then he was secretly communicating with a girl from another club. I entered my husband's birthday and easily unlocked his smartphone. I opened the messaging app and was shocked. As I feared, there were flirty exchanges with a particular woman recorded. I immediately confronted my husband. His confused state was like a monkey in the zoo. It's not like that. This was just a lapse in judgment. So you admitted cheating? You had a relationship with this woman? Well, let's make love at our usual hotel. Kisses. You are not young to send such a message. She is a high school graduate and a newcomer. Summing up my husband's story, he basically cheated with a new female employee. My husband was her trainer. It's a common story, but I wonder what kind of education he was giving her. I'm really sorry. I swear I won't make such a mistake again. In the end, I forgave my groveling husband. This has been happening since our university days. I can't help but sigh at my sloppy husband's attitude. Unlike our student days, we had too many obligations. If we were to divorce, we would have to report it to our families, friends, and coworkers, and it would make them disappointed. Honestly, it was easier to give my husband a horse golden than to do such troublesome things. I made him write an apology letter. If he made the same mistake again, he wouldn't get away with it. That was a promise. That's how our married life continued, barely surviving several storms. One day, I received news of my father's death. According to my crying mother on the phone, he seemed to have collapsed on the way home from drinking and was taken to the hospital. It appeared to be a stroke. My father's discovery was late, and on top of that, last night was in the middle of winter, so he unfortunately never came back to life. He was 60 years old, just before retirement. I took care of all the funeral arrangements. My mother cried all the time and wasn't in any condition to manage. With the support of relatives and a hollowed-out mother, I barely managed to complete the funeral proceedings. I felt sorry for the inconvenience to the workplace, but my colleagues and superiors never complained. I'll never forget about it. One issue was to deal with my sister. I have a sister 2 years older than me. Her name is Anna. After graduating from high school, my sister left our parents' home, so I hadn't seen her for nearly 10 years. The circumstances of her living were problematic. My sister had always been a troublemaker, causing trouble for our parents. She had been involved with the police more than once or twice. Her relationships with men were particularly unrestrained, and she had been involved with multiple adult men since junior high school. Some of these men were married. Because of my sister's behavior, my parents scolded her all the time. Live a decent life. Don't ruin your own life. Although it was sound advice, it didn't seem to resonate with my sister at all. Finally, it was discovered that she had secretly given money from our house to a male host, which led to a huge fight with both of our parents, especially our father. "Get out," he said. "It's not surprising that my father declared this inheritance. I don't even think of you as my daughter anymore." In response to his words, my sister also retorted and stormed out of the house. "He will want to come back to such a poor and gloomy house," as she said. My sister never showed her face to us again until my father passed away. Even though I had to inform her of our father's death, her cell phone number was still the same. So I had to send her a short message informing her of our father's death on the same day. My mom said there's no need for that, I explained. My mom was angry, but I couldn't ignore my sister. There was no contact from my sister until just before the funeral. If she doesn't come, it's fine then, I thought. Just when I was thinking that, my sister finally showed up at the post-cremation meal where we were breaking our fast after mourning. My sister's face, with her makeup thicker by 3 times than before, faced us after about 10 years. "Huh, so you get married without much upgrading to our late father," she remarked. My sister seemed interested in the fact that I had brought my husband, who had managed to participate in the ceremony during the break from his work. He had been timid, meek as a lamb, until my sister showed up. He is not the type of person who came here briskly in ceremonial situations, I explained. I had a mess his mothering. I wish this would end soon, I thought. "Your husband isn't bad-looking, is he?" My sister asked. "What did you get to know him at work?" "We met through a club in college. Our workplaces are completely different," I replied. "Huh, you hooked a good one. You were always studying, right?" she continued. "Well, if you could get a man with a decent education, that's good. You don't seem to be struggling with money," she remarked. "Well, since one of us is a doctor, the salary is decent. We both work. But more importantly, you should properly greet our father," I suggested. "Huh, a doctor," my sister mused, her eyes seeming to plot something. He may have even licked her lips. My husband, subjected to her snake-like gaze, was simply flustered. We disbanded on that day. My sister, who said she would contact me soon, didn't contribute any condolence money in the end. I had no intention of following up on my mother's lament, and fill your child things started to get strange after about 6 months. Although the sadness of losing my father had not yet healed, I had almost completely forgotten about the days of the funeral and my sister. On the other hand, it seems that my sister remembered it well about my husband, Brandon. After work, I saw a familiar figure near the station. The navy suit was the one I had just cleaned for yesterday. What surprised me was the sight of the woman next to him. They were holding hands, looking friendly. Again, my husband's bad habits. As the flames of anger flared up, I realized my husband's crime was not just that. This time I was taken aback more than angry. Next to my husband, flowering her mini skirt, was my sister, Hannah, holding my husband's hand. My husband cheating with my own sister. I blurted out involuntarily, then decided to follow them. If this is truly an affair, I will not forgive my husband this time. I've been tormented by my husband's womanizing many times, but if it's with my own sister, it's beyond a joke. Moreover, the occasion where they met face to face was at my dad's funeral. I'll definitely catch them in the act. I gritted my teeth and focused on not losing sight of them as expected. They headed towards the hotel district. It was still daytime. My husband was supposed to be at work. I wonder what kind of excuse he used to leave the office. They walked past numerous hotels, glued even closer together. At one of the hotels where they finally stopped, they started kissing. Disgusting. This is the first time I have witnessed my husband's infidelity. Then they went into the hotel in front of them. I called my husband's smartphone after learning the two of them were off the hook for a while, holding back my nausea. After an irritating wait, my husband finally picked up the phone. "What is it?" "I'm working." "There's something I really need to check with you." "Who are you with right now?" "With my colleagues and boss, of course. We have an important meeting coming up." "Oh, so you have important meetings at the Love Hotel Jewelry Resort. Quite a flippant name, isn't it?" "How do you?" "I also know that my sister is with you. You're the one who needs to explain. Just wait there with my sister." After I had an ace up my sleeve, Brandon's voice seemed muffled and raspy. Finally, after checking with my sister, he informed me of the room number. All right. I embraced myself and stormed into the hotel. I explained the situation to the receptionist and paid for another room. After all this humiliation he has put me through, I won't show any mercy to my husband. When I opened the door to room 402, my husband was waiting there with a pale face. He was already dressed in a gown, having taken off his suit. My sister had the same gown as my husband and a mocking expression on her face. The pitiful wife showed up. She started smirking, showing no sign of remorse. On the contrary, she seemed to be enjoying the situation just like half a year ago. Her makeup was heavily plastered like paint. First, I confronted my sister. She was making a creepy face. "Hannah, what are you thinking? You knew he's my husband, and you laid your hands on him, didn't you?" "Well, it's frustrating. After being kicked out of the house, I've had a really hard time. I was even abandoned by the host I was sponsoring. I didn't have a single thing going well for me. Despite all that, you live in a happy married life. You left home because of your selfishness, right? You troubled your parents till the end, and now you will try to ruin my family too." The chaos was there from the start. I heard from Brandon. "It's truly pitiful because you always say harsh things. He doesn't even have a moment of peace at home. That's why I've been comforting him. Don't say whatever you want. This is a problem within our family. So you're just not satisfying your husband, are you? A boring woman like you. I'm different in that respect. I'm satisfying him. That's why we've been going out for half a year now." "You're lying. It's been since right after my father's funeral. Understand me, Jessica. I was at my limit too. You were always nagging me, and there was hardly any marital affection. We haven't even been intimate for over a year now." The husband exposing the couple's shame in front of his wife's sister, although embarrassing as it was to the point of crying. I returned it to my husband. "The reason we couldn't stay as a couple was because of your womanizing. Have you forgotten your promise that you would never be dreaming again? That, and on top of that, how come it's my sister? Besides, right after my father's funeral." "Hey, stop building, Brandon. It's not yours anymore, right, Brandon?" My sister, who had interjected, seemed to be whispering something to my husband. He lifted his head, which had been lowered, and turned to me with determination. Now I was the one taken aback. "Jessica, please divorce me. We're having a baby." "What? You heard it. I'm pregnant." Now, of course, the father is Brandon. We've been making love almost every week since then, and this belly is the fruit of that." While speaking, her sister lovingly struck her belly. I was left speechless. This was no accident, but a deliberate act. From the start, my sister intended to steal my husband, and my husband also intended to end her marriage. That's why they didn't use contraception. They went out of their way to show me the baby in her belly. Too bad you don't stand a chance. He's mine now. He's leaving you and marrying me, right, Brandon? Yeah, let's be happy together. No, the three of us with our baby. I will do my best. You've been dumped. Truly my condolences. There goes your elegant lifestyle. From now on, that will be mine. After my sister's laughter echoed, I left the hotel room. To be honest, I don't remember how I made it home. I vomited 3 times in the toilet at home as I rushed up my stomach acid. I couldn't stop crying. I was more upset about being betrayed than about losing my husband. My husband and sister trampled on my humanity. Moreover, they made use of the baby. I cried all night and greeted the morning with a drained body. From that day on, my husband did not come home. There was no doubt that he had moved into my sister's place. Probably soon, he would pack up and leave. At that time, he might bring divorce papers of me along with a wedding ring we chose together 5 years ago, the worst day of my life. Nevertheless, I couldn't afford to take a day off from work. There were people who depended on me above all. Now, only my work is my anchor. Holding back nausea and tears, I gritted my teeth and headed to the workplace. A week later, while I was working as usual at the workplace, my husband and sister showed up in front of me. I was not very surprised, but the two of them seemed to be quite shocked. As my sister sat in a chair for a patient, holding her belly, she stared at me in my white coat in astonishment. "Why are you here?" "Because this is an obstetrics and gynecology department, and I am on duty today. The doctor who usually examines you is off due to some circumstances." "You are a doctor, but what?" Why Brandon was supposed to be the doctor. My sister looked puzzled, looking back and forth between my husband and me. I found it funny and explained it to her properly. "You must have misunderstood, sister. I am the one who is a doctor. I worked hard to get into medical school. But at the funeral, Brandon said he was a doctor. You got yourself a highly educated husband. I only said if one person is a doctor, the salary will be decent. You misunderstood that, but Brandon said he was a doctor." As my sister's gaze pierced him, my husband, who seemed to have come along as an escort, only turned pale. He repeated clumsy excuses like a fish washed up on the beach. "No, I was actually thinking of talking to you seriously, but then you mentioned getting pregnant. So you lied about being a doctor just to impress my sister and sleep with her. How pathetic. You're an adult doctor, you're a low-paid salesman." "Well, that's..." "What do you mean, no paid? What about $1 million a month? We've already started looking at luxury apartments, and we've even contacted a regular car dealer to get a car. I've already maxed out my credit card on designer bags and shoes. Why would you waste money like that? And why is Jessica even at this hospital? She's supposed to be working at a different hospital. That's why I brought her here. When I took time off for my father's funeral, the doctor from this hospital helped me out multiple times. Now she has a situation, so I'm returning the favor. I've been working hard even while you two were cheating on me, Jessica. Listen, this is the end of us. I'm fed up with you. Go ahead and divorce or remarry, but make sure to pay me alimony." "Wait, Jessica, I was wrong. I'll change my ways this time. Let's forget about the divorce for now." "What are you saying? Remember when you cheated with a girl from your office? You promised me that if it happened again, you'd pay whatever amount of alimony I demanded." I showed my husband's written pledge I had taken with my smartphone camera at that time, complete with his signature and thumbprint. My husband let out a silent scream. At least 5 million yen? No, considering it was right after my father's funeral. I could even add a bit more. I'll contact a good lawyer. You two can wait and tremble. Wait, does that mean I have to pay alimony too? Are you going to demand it from me? Of course, that's what it means to steal your sister's husband. Don't worry, I'll give you a grace period until the baby is born. That's my moral obligation as an obstetrician. But instead, make sure you paid up after the baby is born. I'll have you give up all your designer bags and shoes, and I'll add the funeral offering for my father. You apologize on your knees in front of his grave. I glared at my sister and walked away, started the regular examination. As soon as I instructed her to get on the bed, my sister fled the examination room. Perhaps she was afraid of me wearing rubber gloves. My husband remained, seemed to want to say something, but he meekly retreated under the cold stares of the nurses. Thinking that I wouldn't have to see my husband's face anymore, I felt truly liberated. And then another half a year later, it seems that my sister had a baby safely at a different obstetrics and gynecology clinic. Regardless of what my sister has done, the newborn baby is innocent. Knowing it was a healthy baby girl, I had relieved deep down. But as for my sister herself, it's a different story. I don't feel a shred of pity for her. As I declared after the baby was born, I sent my sister a letter demanding alimony. The total is 5.3 million yen. Of course, 300,000 yen is for the condolence money for my father's funeral. I plan to deliver it to my mother. As for my husband, no, my ex-husband, life seems to be quite tough with the alimony he owes me. His workplace also, due to the rumors of his affair, he had no choice but to resign. It seems difficult for him to get rehired as a full-time employee. I heard he's juggling temp jobs now. As for who spread the rumors of the affair at his former workplace, I think it's best left unsaid. Furthermore, through the grapevine, I heard he hasn't gotten over his womanizing ways. He seems to be injuring my sister by hitting on any woman close at hand. At this rate, they seem like a suitable couple, and I feel truly refreshed being able to break up with my ex-husband. Now I'm dedicating myself to my work as an obstetrician. Today, 2 mothers-to-be with big bellies are waiting for my help. You can't even do household chores, so we might as well get a divorce. And you better give me your assets too, James said with a smirk as he walked into the hospital room. I was hooked up to many machines, but that didn't stop him. A girl I didn't know stood next to him. James didn't realize I had $10 million in assets. He should understand that a divorce in this situation would be a matter of life and death for a housewife like me. I have the divorce papers, I thought. I couldn't stay with a man who verbally abused his wife. I pulled out the divorce papers I always carried with me and handed them to James, grinning. He accepted them. Now I can say goodbye to you. I'll be happy with her, so don't worry, right, Patricia? James said, wrapping his arm around the girl's waist. Her name was Patricia Heaton. James sneered at me, and she said, "Take care, Mrs. O. You're not Mrs. anymore." "Take care, ma'am." They both laughed as they left the room, but their happiness wouldn't last. Alone in the room, I laughed out loud. Today is Friday, so the divorce will be processed on Monday. I can't wait for 3 days from now. My name is Nicole Wallace. I'm a 47-year-old housewife. My family runs a regular farm. I don't have any special skills, but I'm proud of my vast cooking repertoire. My husband, James, is the same age as me, and we were college classmates. We both came to Florida from the countryside. Since we both lived alone, I used to cook various dishes for James using the vegetables and rice sent from my family. People often said I captured his heart through his stomach, and I knew it was true. James has always been incapable of doing any household chores. I've been taking care of him since we started dating, and after we got married, I continued to handle all the household tasks. Sadly, we didn't have children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both love to eat, and on James's days off, we often go on drives to enjoy delicious food. When we first got married, James was kind, but after about 5 years, he became controlling. He never hit me, but his remarks became harsh, often saying, "Whose money do you think we're living on?" Those words hurt, but I didn't have the energy to fight back, assuming he wouldn't listen anyway. Being a full-time housewife made me feel inferior, and I couldn't stand up to him. James joined a well-known company after graduating from university, but quit after about 6 years. He quickly found new jobs but would resign from them after short periods. Because of this, our income was unstable. We managed by looking for money-saving tips, but often struggled with our finances. However, at the company he'd been with for the past 3 years, he seemed to get along with his colleagues. I had faint hopes he might stay there for a long time. Then one day, James came home earlier than usual. "I'm home." "I quit my job," he said. "What again?" I said, surprised. James's eyebrows twitched. I stopped cooking and rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I was just shocked," I said. "No welcome back, and you're criticizing what I do." "You've become quite bold," James said. His words made me freeze. James was in a very bad mood, and if I said the wrong thing, it could get worse. "I'm sorry," I said, "as long as you understand." He replied, somewhat placated. He sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed a beer and a glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he replied. To avoid upsetting James, I played the role of a submissive wife. I once had a strong sense of self, but after 16 years of marriage to James since the age of 30, I really showed my true self. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, James fell asleep snoring on the sofa. The table was a mess, like a child had eaten there. I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and food scraps on the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this, recalling my dreams of a happy married life from my girlhood days. My true feelings slipped out. I glanced at James suddenly, but he showed no signs of waking. Relief washed over me, but I also felt dread about continuing this life. Maybe I should consider divorce. I started planning my schedule for the next day, determined to face the issues I had been avoiding. The next day, James started visiting the employment office and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting, I went to the city office and signed divorce papers. I wasn't ready to submit them, but having them felt like a kind of protection. I hid the signed divorce papers at the bottom of my bag. If James found them, who knows what he might say or do. "Hey, where did you go while I was job hunting?" he asked. I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes. "Look, I thought you might need them," I said, trying to sound normal. James, who got home before I did, initially interrogated me suspiciously, but quickly cheered up. I handed him the resumes I had bought earlier. After receiving them, James said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. James's new job was at a reputable company with a solid salary and better benefits than any job he'd had before. When he got promoted after working there for about 2 years, he celebrated with a drink. I secretly hoped that maybe this time he would work there until retirement. James' department seemed to be in sales, and he started to leave home more frequently for evening events. I enjoyed my brief moments of freedom and gathered energy to greet James with a smile when he returned. One day, I received a call from my mother after a long time. Hearing her excited story took me by surprise. $10 million? I asked, stunned. Yes, $10 million. You know the mountains and lands we owned. We don't need them anymore. We had them appraised, and they are worth $15 million. We only need $3 million to enjoy the rest of our lives. So I think you might want to rethink your life too, she said. My mother was never fond of James. She was worried about me, especially after James became more controlling, preventing me from even visiting my childhood home. I was stunned by the amount she mentioned. Furthermore, I was shocked to learn that when my mother inherited the property from my grandmother, she changed the title to my name, so there were no inheritance taxes. It's better not to tell James, but the final decision is yours, she said, hanging up the phone. I felt conflicted between the urge to immediately inform James and the desire to live freely with that money. About a week later, I was involved in a traffic accident. Thankfully, my life wasn't in danger, but I need to stay in the hospital for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital room drawer, I immediately contacted James. I'm sorry I got injured, I said. What about my meals? James's reaction made me almost laugh, prioritizing his meals over my injury. I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. I'm really sorry, but could you buy your meals elsewhere until then? Not even preparing meals for your husband. What a lazy wife. Oh wait, I'm coming over now, James said and ended the call abruptly. I was planning to tell him about the inheritance tonight, but now I thought it might be best not to mention it. Looking at all the tubes attached to me, I had a feeling my intuition was right. You're useless, can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce, and you better pay me compensation too, James said with a smirk as soon as he entered the room. I was connected to several machines, and a girl I didn't recognize stood beside him. James didn't know that my total assets amounted to $10 million. He should realize that a divorce under these circumstances would be a life and death matter for me. A housewife? Fine, here's the divorce papers, I said. I couldn't stay with a man who would hurl abuse at his wife in this condition. I handed him the divorce papers I had kept as a sort of charm. James took them with a smug smile on his face. With this, I can finally say goodbye to you. I'm going to be happy with her, right, Patricia? James said, wrapping his arm around the girl's waist. The girl named Patricia leaned against James and scoffed at me. Take care, madam. Oh, you're not a madam anymore, so take care, old lady, she said. With those words, they both left the room laughing. But their joy would be short-lived. Left alone in my room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers would only be processed on Monday. Oh, I cannot wait for 3 days from now, I thought. Just as I had expected, the weekend went by without any contact from James, and it was quite peaceful. I was restless, not used to doing nothing since getting married. I was always busy. Every time I got restless, the nurses told me to stay calm. Then on Monday evening, I received a bunch of calls from James. I ignored them at first, but after 15 minutes of constant ringing, I decided to answer. Could you not be so persistent? I said, Hey, what's the meaning of this? James shouted as soon as I picked up. I couldn't help but laugh. James seemed infuriated by my laughter and started screaming incoherently. What are you talking about? I asked. Don't play dumb. The divorce papers aren't being accepted, are they? James was huffing and puffing on the other side of the phone. I continued to chuckle and responded to his complaint. Oh, I had previously filed a non-acceptance notification. Remember how you used to say, let's get divorced, every time we had a fight? I thought it wouldn't be good if you filed for divorce on a whim during one of our arguments. Ew, but I don't need that now. Withdraw it immediately, James demanded. I can't do that until I'm discharged. We need to go through procedures at the municipal office, I said. Then discharge now, don't be unreasonable. His selfish demands made me laugh even more. He probably wanted to register his marriage with Patricia, whom he brought on Friday. By the way, was her name Patricia? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Patricia. Apologize. She's my new wife. We are not divorced yet, so she's technically your mistress, isn't she? I responded calmly. James made a weird groaning sound. I decided to hit him where it hurt the most. By the way, you'll hear from my lawyer about the division of property. That's right, property, including this trouble. You better share properly. I'm not sure why he misunderstood, but James suddenly sounded in high spirits. After all, the responsible party has to pay the compensation. I had always done my household chores diligently, and of course I had never cheated on him. It's clear as day that James is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who has to give me the assets, James responded, genuinely confused. He likely believed that by not taking care of him while I was hospitalized, I would truly be at fault. Even in my parents' time, one wouldn't be deemed at fault for such a reason. I bitterly thought this as I listened to his rant. I explained to him patiently, what fault of mine are you talking about? Just so you know, not being able to do housework because I'm in the hospital doesn't make me at fault. You've abandoned taking care of me. If you were a child, it would be considered normal, but you're an adult and should be able to take care of yourself. That's why it doesn't make me at fault. If I say you're at fault, then you're at fault. James insisted. Even a judge would be shocked by his baffling logic. I pictured myself face-palming. Did he really think such childish reasoning would work? Don't you know what's legally defined as grounds for fault? Being at fault means things like infidelity, like having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Patricia is my new wife, and you're no longer of any use to me. So it doesn't apply, right? What are you talking about? Since you were dating her behind my back, it's clearly cheating, I said. James still didn't seem to understand. He was set on believing he was right. Either way, please communicate through a lawyer from now on. Goodbye, he shouted. Hey, Nicole. But I hung up the phone without listening to his protests. He called multiple times, but when I ignored him, he eventually gave up and went silent. I was relieved, but the next day, another headache-inducing event occurred. Feeling frustrated by the nonstop ringing from 9 o'clock in the morning, I pressed the call button. On the other end, James was complaining at me like a machine gun. At first, I wasn't sure what he was saying, but piecing it together, it seemed he was complaining about not being able to withdraw money from a bank account. If it's a joint account, James should be able to withdraw without any issue, I recalled. But if not, I remembered the bank cards and passbooks I had left at home and asked, "Were you trying to take money from my account by any chance?" "Exactly," he replied. "You're still in the hospital, and I was going to take the money into account, but the card won't work." James rumbled on with his unreasonable argument. It seemed he didn't understand what I said yesterday when I was scheduled to be hospitalized for a week. I had called the bank and requested they prevent withdrawals until I was discharged. It was to prevent James, who was reckless with money, from depleting my savings while I was in the hospital. My decision was proven right. It's unthinkable to try to withdraw money from the account of an ex-wife you've divorced, I told him. However, James didn't see anything wrong with it and asked me to make a withdrawal immediately. "What are you talking about? We are practically strangers now. Why would I do as you say?" I replied, "You and my life haven't changed. Even if we're getting divorced, act like a proper wife and listen to me, James insisted. We are not legally divorced yet, but we are already strangers. Got it. Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to strangers, I said. James was shocked since I had never resisted him this much before. But he quickly became assertive again. Just do as I say. Send the money now. Pay the compensation for not doing housework, he demanded. Even though he was academically capable when we first met, he seemed to lack common sense. 18 years into our marriage, it was clear I had made a poor choice in a partner. James seemed frustrated that I wasn't giving in. He likely had exhausted his cash on hand and probably dipped into the living expenses I had left at home and from our shared account. I spoke to James as if I was talking to a small child. Listen, I'm no longer your submissive wife. We'll settle a property division through a lawyer later on. What? You're so insolent. I'm coming over right now. Just wait, James said, hanging up the phone. I didn't mind if he came to the hospital, but I had already asked the nurses' station not to let anyone in except for my parents, so it was unlikely he'd make it to my room. James really did come to the hospital, but as expected, he was stopped at the nurses' station. My phone kept ringing, but after ignoring it for a while, it switched to messages, and my screen was flooded with notifications. I saved all of them as evidence and contacted my lawyer. After a while, it seemed the lawyer had gotten in touch with James as the messages stopped coming in. I thought it was the end, but my hopes were about to be dashed. There's a visitor named Julia. Would you like to see her? The nurse asked. Julia, please let her in, I replied. Julia was a friend who shared my hobbies. Back then, when I was single, Julia and I became close after she responded to my posts on social media where I shared my dining experiences. We discovered we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After getting married, I couldn't dine out as much to save money, but we kept in touch by regularly meeting for tea and chats. Nicole, are you okay from the injury? Julia asked as soon as she entered the room. Yes, I'm feeling much better now. Thank you, I replied. Julia's immediate concern warmed my heart. I realized that since my hospitalization, aside from my parents and the hospital staff, no one had shown concern for me. Hey, Nicole, things are tough for you right now, aren't they? Julia asked. Huh, why? I hadn't told anyone about my situation other than my parents. I wondered how Julia knew and asked her. In a treat, Julia then said something shocking. You know Patricia, the young girl, right? She's having an affair with your husband, isn't she? What? How do you know about that? Wait, you know her. Actually, she's my niece, Julia replied hesitantly. I was so surprised that I couldn't close my mouth. Who would have thought that Julia was Patricia's aunt? The room went silent. It was the first time there was silence when Julia was around, and it made me feel uneasy. Patricia suddenly told her mother, my sister, that she's getting married. What's more shocking is that her partner is 47 years old. When I saw the photo, it was your husband. I was so surprised. I've already told my sister. I'm so sorry for all the trouble my niece has caused you, Nicole. Don't apologize, Julia. It's not your fault, I said. Julia looked like she was about to cry. I'm thinking of demanding compensation from Patricia. I can't compromise on that. But if I do, does this mean our relationship will end? Of course not. I want to continue being friends with you, Nicole. I'll make sure Patricia pays compensation. Neither my sister nor I can forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her, Julia said. I was very grateful for Julia's words. We've been friends for over 22 years. I didn't want to lose a precious friend because of my terrible husband and his mistress. I scheduled a meeting with them tomorrow, and I'd like you to come with me, Julia said. Of course, I'll be there. And I can also provide photos as evidence of their affair, I replied. The next day, fresh from being discharged from the hospital, I prepared for the meeting. I went to a private restaurant room with my lawyer, James, and Patricia. They had already arrived and were indulging in an expensive traditional meal. I was speechless at their audacity. You finally made it. Did you bring the money? Remember, you were paying for this meal, James said without even stopping his meal. Patricia continued to eat with a smug look on her face. I decided to fight back. Please handle the payment yourselves. I came here to demand a fair share of the assets from the two of you. How long are you going to hold? You're really unattractive, James remarked rudely, ignoring his comments. My lawyer and I took our seats and showed evidence proving James was at fault. We first presented legal documents about the reasons for liability, followed by documents on property division. Lastly, we showed the photos Julia had provided, which showed Patricia and James together, as well as Patricia with another man entering a hotel. Wait, why, hey, Patricia, what is this? James and Patricia were visibly shaken by the photos and finally stopped eating. Just then, Julia made her timely entrance. I took those photos, Julia said. Patricia seemed confused as to why her aunt was present. With cold eyes, Julia looked down at Patricia and James and calmly spoke about being friends with me for 22 years and how their actions were despicable. Patricia, you mentioned that the baby you're carrying is his. But given your actions, who knows who the father is? Wait, no. This was the first time I was hearing about her pregnancy. Judging by her appearance today, one would never guess she was pregnant. However, James's reaction showed he believed her claim. So you're pregnant. In that case, after a DNA test, I'll demand an additional penalty. No, I'm sorry. I lied about the pregnancy. Please forgive me, Patricia suddenly admitted, bowing deeply. She had been searching for wealthy old men, and James was her target. He bought her designer goods and promised her a life where she wouldn't have to work and could do as she pleased. She believed she could be a housewife and occasionally have flings with men of her choice. She had once lied about being pregnant because James showed no signs of wanting to divorce. James froze with his mouth open when he heard this. I'm truly sorry, but I can't give you anything. I don't have the money, he said. I'll pay in advance, Patricia. You're going to work part-time diligently every month and repay me. You won't have any free time until you've paid me back in full, Julia said firmly. Oh no, Patricia looked disheartened. Julia mentioned she would bring Patricia back later for another apology and took her out of the restaurant. James, in shock the entire time, seemed to snap back to reality and approached me in a flattering tone. Look, it seems I was deceived. I can't live without you, Nicole. Right, we still have the divorce papers here. Can we start over? You've always been a housewife, so you can't possibly work now, can you? He pleaded. I listened to James's pleas with a cold gaze, none of which moved me. I waited for him to finish before answering with a smile. I can live just fine without you. I'll be taking the divorce papers and filing them shortly. Also, I never mentioned this, but my personal net worth is currently around $10 million, so I can live comfortably without working for the rest of my life. Rest assured. 10 million? Why did you keep such a fortune a secret? James asked, shocked. I was about to tell you when you started making a fuss about divorce. This money is my personal inheritance, so it doesn't count towards marital assets. It has nothing to do with you, I replied. James looked at me with utter despair. My lawyer quickly produced some documents and a pen for James to sign. The lawyer and I then left and immediately filed for divorce, ending our almost 22-year marriage. Later, Patricia transferred some money to my account. Upon learning of this incident, Patricia's mother was furious. She made Patricia take a leave from university and worked nonstop at a relative's inn until she paid the compensation. James, on the other hand, was disowned by his in-laws after they learned about the divorce. He was told he wouldn't receive any assistance, so he reluctantly took out a loan and paid me in one lump sum. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had been with Patricia at a hotel during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now juggling multiple construction jobs to repay his debts. As for me, even after receiving such a large sum, I didn't know what to spend it on, so I donated half to charity. I then moved to the countryside with the remaining money and am now enjoying a luxurious single life. I've continued my friendship with Julia. On our days off, we go on food tours and short trips. We both plan to stay single, so I suggested maybe we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Julia agreed when I mentioned we could share deliveries and she could join my meals. Moving preparations started the following week. As I packed up my old life, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the new chapter ahead. The thought of living true to myself, free from the chains of a toxic marriage, filled me with joy. Julia and I found a beautiful house in the countryside. It was spacious and surrounded by lush greenery. We both loved the tranquility it offered, a stark contrast to the chaos and stress of city life. We set up a cozy living space, complete with a kitchen where we could continue our culinary adventures. As we settled into our new home, our days were filled with laughter and good food. We explored local markets, tried new recipes, and even started a small vegetable garden. The simplicity of our routine brought immense satisfaction. Julia and I grew even closer, sharing not just our home, but also our dreams and plans for the future. Despite the hardships I faced, I realized that my life had taken a turn for the better. The toxic relationship with James was a thing of the past, and I had found a true friend in Julia. Together, we built a life filled with love, respect, and mutual support. One sunny afternoon, as Julia and I enjoyed a picnic in our garden, I reflected on my journey. I had gone from feeling trapped and undervalued to experiencing freedom and contentment. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and learned the importance of standing up for myself. The lessons I learned during my marriage and the subsequent divorce were invaluable. They taught me resilience and the importance of self-worth. I realized that happiness comes from within, and that surrounding yourself with supportive people makes all the difference. Julia and I often talked about our future plans. We dreamed of traveling, exploring new cuisines, and perhaps starting a small business together. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly optimistic about the future. Life in the countryside was peaceful and fulfilling. The fresh air, the sound of birds, and the beauty of nature provided a perfect backdrop for our new beginning. I had found a sense of purpose and joy in the simple things, and it was a feeling I cherished deeply. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, Julia and I continued to thrive. Our bond grew stronger, and our friendship became the foundation of our happiness. We supported each other through thick and thin, always knowing that we had someone to rely on. Looking back, I realized that leaving James was the best decision I ever made. It allowed me to rediscover myself and build a life filled with love, laughter, and true companionship. Julia and I had created a haven where we could be ourselves, free from judgment and filled with joy. In the end, I learned that life's challenges often lead to unexpected blessings. My journey taught me the importance of self-respect, the power of friendship, and the beauty of living authentically. I was excited for the future, knowing that with Julia by my side, anything was possible. I was determined to live my life joyfully and true to myself from now on. My name is Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. I wish he could have seen his grandchildren, and that thought weighed heavily on me. I got married 5 years ago when I was 25. At my wedding, my father and I made a promise that I would tell him first when I got pregnant, but that promise remained unfulfilled. It's my one regret about my father, even though I did everything I could for him since his illness was diagnosed a year ago. I visited my parents' home frequently and accompanied my mother to the hospital. I increased the frequency of my phone calls and video chats, but I still can't shake the feeling that I could have done more. My mother, sitting next to me, reassured me. "You did your best, Chelsea." "Really?" I asked. "Yes, your father would have been satisfied," she said. At that moment, my sister Portia walked in with the lawyer. The lawyer, a man in his mid-40s, introduced himself as Samo and handed me his business card. "I'm the attorney. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat," he said. "Excuse me," my mother said as she guided him to a seat. Once he was settled, my sister blurted out, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance, and it's not all for you." "Portia, I know that," I said. My sister, now glaring at me, I glared back. Our relationship had become strained since we learned of Dad's illness, mainly because of Portia's arrogance. Despite my attempts to reach out, she never visited our father. Of course, I may have been too harsh because I was worried about him, but her indifference was also a problem. "You're not a child, so stop being so stubborn," I said. "I'm not being stubborn," she retorted. "I live in a city. It's not easy to come out to the countryside. But you can get here in 2 hours by car," I said. "Those 2 hours are tough and costly," she shot back. "It's the money that's important to you, isn't it?" "Of course I'm busy, so stop contacting me," she said. With that, she stopped talking. Even though she lived far away, she could have visited occasionally. That's why our relationship soured so quickly. In the end, Portia never visited our father, and our relationship never improved. The lawyer sensed the tension and intervened. "Let's calm down, please." "I apologize," I said, and the lawyer nodded. "As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will here. He contacted me a few weeks before he passed away. We met at the hospital, and he wrote the will in front of me with his primary physician present," the lawyer explained. My father had arranged for his physician to contact the lawyer upon his passing. Then the lawyer reached out to us, which brings us to the present moment. He pulled out a white envelope and placed it in front of us. "This is the will," he said. I recognized my father's handwriting on the envelope. Portia seemed impatient. "Never mind that. Just tell us what's in it." "I'm busy," she snapped. "Of course," the lawyer said with a wry smile as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my father's wishes. Besides the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. We knew about the house and land. My name is Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. I wish he could have seen his grandchildren, and that thought weighed heavily on me. I got married 5 years ago when I was 25. At my wedding, my father and I made a promise that I would tell him first when I got pregnant, but that promise remained unfulfilled. It's my one regret about my father, even though I did everything I could for him since his illness was diagnosed a year ago. I visited my parents' home frequently and accompanied my mother to the hospital. I increased the frequency of my phone calls and video chats, but I still can't shake the feeling that I could have done more. My mother, sitting next to me, reassured me. "You did your best, Chelsea." "Really?" I asked. Yes, your father would have been satisfied, she said. At that moment, my sister Portia walked in with the lawyer. The lawyer, a man in his mid-40s, introduced himself as Samo and handed me his business card. I'm the attorney. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat, he said. Excuse me, my mother said as she guided him to a seat. Once he was settled, my sister blurted out, I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance, and it's not all for you. Portia, I know that, I said. My sister, now glaring at me, I glared back. Our relationship had become strained since we learned of Dad's illness, mainly because of Portia's arrogance. Despite my attempts to reach out, she never visited our father. Of course, I may have been too harsh because I was worried about him, but her indifference was also a problem. You're not a child, so stop being so stubborn, I said. I'm not being stubborn, she retorted. I live in a city. It's not easy to come out to the countryside. But you can get here in 2 hours by car, I said. Those 2 hours are tough and costly, she shot back. It's the money that's important to you, isn't it? Of course I'm busy, so stop contacting me, she said. With that, she stopped talking. Even though she lived far away, she could have visited occasionally. That's why our relationship soured so quickly. In the end, Portia never visited our father, and our relationship never improved. The lawyer sensed the tension and intervened. Let's calm down, please. I apologize, I said, and the lawyer nodded. As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will here. He contacted me a few weeks before he passed away. We met at the hospital, and he wrote the will in front of me with his primary physician present, the lawyer explained. My father had arranged for his physician to contact the lawyer upon his passing. Then the lawyer reached out to us, which brings us to the present moment. He pulled out a white envelope and placed it in front of us. This is the will, he said. I recognized my father's handwriting on the envelope. Portia seemed impatient. Never mind that. Just tell us what's in it. I'm busy, she snapped. Of course, the lawyer said with a wry smile as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my father's wishes. Besides the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. We knew about the house and land, but the storage shed was a surprise. As I was pondering this, Portia angrily interrupted the lawyer. Wait a minute. What about the farm? She asked. Farm? The lawyer asked. Yes, the farm Dad used to work on as a hobby. My father ran a business in the next town, but after turning 50, he started thinking of closing it. I want to slow down a bit. Is that okay? Back when I was in high school, I heard this idea. My sister, already in college, wasn't keen on it, but my mother and I, concerned about my father's health, agreed. Don't worry about the money, Portia, my father reassured her. Reluctantly, she agreed, and so my father closed his company and started farming near our home. He found joy in moving his body while farming and seeing him happy. I felt reassured that we had made the right decision. My sister, however, didn't seem to share the sentiment. She had promised to return home after college, but ended up getting a job near her university. Eventually, she married the CEO of an aita company she met through work. That's why Father took up farming until he fell ill. My sister insisted that the farm should be part of the inheritance. When the lawyer reviewed the documents, he quickly found a note stating that the farm was rented land. Rented. My sister said, disappointed, but I thought we owned a large piece of land. Indeed, the farm where my father grew vegetables was spacious, but maybe it was for the best that it was rented. Considering we knew little about farming, the conversation then turned to dividing the inheritance. The house and land go to the wife, the lawyer declared, so we can divide the rest however we want. Please divide the savings and storage shed between you two, he continued. Savings mean cash, right? I'll take the cash, my sister asked. How much is it? The savings amount to about $100,000, the lawyer replied. There's no need to pay inheritance tax for this amount. Then I'll take the $100,000 in cash, my sister declared triumphantly. But I couldn't agree with such a selfish arrangement. I strongly protested against my sister. Wait a minute, I object. Why? I'm the oldest daughter, I argued. That's irrelevant. You can have the storage shed, my sister retorted, flipping through the documents. What even is that, anyway? She asked the lawyer. It's the storage shed next to the farm. You'll inherit the building, the land, and its contents, the lawyer explained. My sister's eyes lit up at the mention of land. Even though she's married to the CEO of an aita company, does she still want more money? I wondered as I pondered. The lawyer continued, but it's about 65 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom. A small bedroom? Yes, here are the photos, the lawyer said, placing them on the table. The exterior looked like a rundown shack, and the interior contained only basic tools, nothing of significant value. I don't want it, my sister grimaced, glancing at the photos. The shed looked ordinary, almost unremarkable. These items are sentimental, but they won't bring in any money. As I considered the situation, my sister spoke up. Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have the dirty shed. Hold on, that's not fair, I protested. You agreed to vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now? Her response left me with little to argue. Still, I couldn't let her take all of Dad's inheritance without standing up for myself. So we're good then, my sister pressed, waiting for my answer. My mother interrupted. As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections. Portia quickly agreed. Of course, I won't complain. So it was decided Portia would get the cash, and I would receive the shed. My sister grinned triumphantly, but I wasn't content. I objected immediately. Just let it go. Why are you so greedy? Portia shot back. That's not it, I argued. You're being a hassle. You care more about money than about Dad's memory. Portia's words left me speechless. Of course, family is more important than money. While money matters, it should never be more valuable than family. But before I could respond, my sister abruptly ended the conversation. In the end, my mother received the house and land, while Portia got Dad's savings. All I was left with was the shed. My sister signed a document agreeing not to dispute the inheritance division, and then laughed loudly. Frustrated, I vented to my mother, "Mom, why didn't you help me?" "I did help you," she replied. "How?" "You let Portia take the cash." "I made sure you got the shed," she said with a smile. I pouted in response, but my mother added, "You might find something surprisingly good if you look closely." The next day, I collected the key from the lawyer and headed to the shed near the field. It was a 10-minute walk from home, along a quiet rural road. Finally, I reached the field my father had rented for the past year. Now that he had been hospitalized, the field stood empty. I unlocked the shed and pushed the door open. "Wow, it's dusty," I muttered as a cloud of dust greeted me. The shed clearly hadn't been cleaned in a while. Still, there might be something of sentimental value left by Dad, I thought, glancing around. But the interior was just a dirty shed filled with farming tools and not much else. While the tools might have sentimental value, they were nothing extraordinary. Maybe I should just take what's inside for now, I mumbled as I continued to survey the room. That's when I noticed something strange. "Huh," I muttered. The inside of the shed seemed smaller than it looked from the outside. Perhaps it was the dim lighting, but the space felt a bit more confined than I had anticipated. Could it be my imagination? I stepped outside to take a closer look around the shed, but the feeling that something was off remained. After thinking it over, I walked around to the back of the shed where it was bordered by a thicket of trees. To my astonishment, there was another door at the back. Wait, another entrance. I gasped. From inside the shed, there had only been a solid wall, indicating the only entrance was the door I used earlier. Yet from the back, there was another door. I was puzzled. How could there be a door at the back that wasn't visible from inside? This suggested there was a separate space accessible only from the outside. Excitement surged through me as I realized this could be one of Dad's surprises. He loved surprises and often surprised me on my birthdays. The memories brought tears to my eyes. Determined to uncover Dad's hidden surprise, I hurried back into the shed and began searching for the key to the back door. If Dad had left something special, he would have likely hidden the key somewhere in the shed. I let my instincts guide me as I began the search. I rummaged through the shed and eventually found 2 keys hidden in the handle of a shovel. Curious, I went around to the back and tried one of the keys in the door. With a click, the door opened. What could be in here? I wondered. Inside the small space, only about 3 feet wide, stood a large safe. Is this from Dad's company? I thought as I recognized the safe. It was the same one I had seen in the corner of his office when I was a child. Feeling nostalgic, I have the safe. This discovery brought back memories of my father and made the inheritance worthwhile. However, knowing Dad, I was sure this wasn't the final surprise. There must be more surprises, I muttered as I inserted the second key into the safe. The door creaked open with a rusty sound. What I saw inside left me speechless. The safe contained an unexpected inheritance. I quickly locked the safe again and rushed to find my mother to share the news. After explaining the situation to her, I called my husband for help moving the safe from my parents' house. It then dawned on me that the contents of the safe were likely part of my inheritance and might require me to pay inheritance tax. I decided to seek professional advice to handle the situation properly. I consulted the lawyer who recommended I speak with a certified public accountant. With a referral from a friend, I found an accountant and left the complicated matters in their hands. A year passed, and just when I thought things had finally settled down, my sister showed up near my home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" I asked my sister, puzzled by her unexpected visit. "Well, I had some business at our parents' house, so I stopped by," she replied vaguely, her behavior striking me as odd. It seemed unlikely that she would casually visit, especially given the tensions surrounding our father's inheritance. Our relationship wasn't one that involved casual drop-ins. I couldn't shake off my suspicion as I observed her. Despite her nervous demeanor, my sister asked, "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment before reluctantly agreeing. Once inside, after serving some coffee, she began to fidget before finally speaking up. "Do you happen to have won the lottery or something?" she blurted out. Confused, I shook my head. No, I didn't. And it's not bonus season for my husband either. Perplexed by her line of questioning, I asked, "What on earth are you talking about?" This seemed to trigger her, and suddenly she grew offensive. "What are you making fun of me for?" she snapped. "No, I'm not making fun of you. I just don't understand what you're talking about," I replied, trying to keep the situation calm. "Money, you have it, don't you?" "Money," she exclaimed, her voice rising with excitement. It was then that she launched into a story she had heard a few days ago. She had run into her aunt in the city by chance, and their conversation had turned to our father's passing. "I know how hard it's been for you since you lost your father. Are you doing okay?" our aunt had asked. "Yes, well, I visited him many times when he was sick. Thank you, my sister had replied. But you must be relieved, right? Getting such a big thank you gift. Our aunt had continued. Thank you gift? Yes, your sister sent me a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting him. Our aunt had revealed. My sister had latched onto this information, convinced that I had sent the gift card. You came into some extra money, didn't you? My sister accused, pressing me for an answer. Ah, so that's what this is about, I sighed, understanding her line of questioning. My reaction seemed to annoy her, and she snapped. Why are you acting like that? Are you mocking me? No, not at all. It was just a thank you gift, I explained calmly. But where did you get the money for it? That's what I want to know, she demanded. From the inheritance, I replied. My sister frowned upon hearing this. All you got was that dirty shed, she said. Yes, that's true, but there was a safe inside the shed. That's where the real inheritance was, I clarified. Real inheritance, she repeated, her interest piqued. I went on to explain the contents of the safe inside were valuable watches my father had collected as a hobby during his life. I admitted that I didn't know their exact worth, but I estimated the remaining savings at around $100,000. Joy and my father have been a successful business owner who retired early. This amount seemed modest. It led me to believe he had invested heavily in those watches. If they're valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax, my mother had pointed out after seeing the contents of the safe. What should I do, Mom? I had asked. She paused to consider and advised. It's best to declare everything properly. Things like this always come out in the end. But how do I go about it? I asked. Let's consult the lawyer we spoke to recently, she suggested. So I scheduled another meeting with the lawyer. I was informed that when you inherit valuable items, the inheritance tax is determined by their current market value. Additionally, I was advised that a certified public accountant could manage the tax situation for me. So I entrusted them with the task. After consulting with the accountant, it was determined that the watches alone were valued at a minimum of $500,000. With such high-value watches, you'll need to pay inheritance tax, the accountant advised. To cover the inheritance tax, I decided to sell some of the watches. Since I lacked expertise in valuing them, it made sense to sell the more expensive pieces to someone who could appreciate their worth. The proceeds from the sale were used to pay the inheritance tax, and I sent thank you gifts to the relatives who had supported us. Those thank you gifts were the gift cards my sister was referring to. Meanwhile, I kept sentimental items like the pocket watch my father often wore. As I shared the story with my sister, I showed her the pocket watch. This one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me, I explained. Despite this, my sister's reaction was less than enthusiastic. You don't have any watches left? She asked. No, I still have some of the safe. It's at Mom's place. The safe is too large for my house and was the one Dad used at his company, I reassured her. My sister murmured, looking away and deep in thought. Her expression made me uneasy, but she soon stood up and announced, I'm leaving. Now that I know where the money came from. She left without further incident. Given my sister's focus on money, I expected she might demand a share of the proceeds from the watch sales, so I was relieved she left without any fuss. In my relief, I overlooked the earlier unease I felt about her demeanor. However, my relief was short-lived. Late that night, my mother called me urgently. Chelsea, it's urgent. Please come over right away, she said, her voice shaky. What happened, Mom? I asked, alarmed by her frantic tone. It's just really bad, she replied. My husband and I rushed to my mother's house. As we approached, we noticed something alarming. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red. "What's going on?" I exclaimed as we got closer. The reason became clear. Several police cars were parked outside my parents' house. I pushed through the crowd and called out to my mother. "What happened, Mom?" My mother told me the story. Around 9:00 p.m., feeling exhausted, she had already gone to bed. Shortly after, she heard